Welcome to the sixth and final episode of our Southwest 2022 trip, where we stayed near the last of 4 national parks. So come along while we travel with the Fergusons. On day 14, after we left Arches National Park, we drove through and stopped to eat lunch at the town of Green River, which had a launch pad for the Athena rockets in the 60s, and it also had this display at one of the parks in town. Then we drove to Yuba Lake State Park in Utah for an overnight. This park had a refreshingly cold lake that was cyan in color. The boys and I took a swim before we left. Then, on day 15, we drove to Great Basin National Park in Nevada. This time we stayed at Whispering Elms RV Park, which was just outside the entrance to the national park. We attended the astronomy night at the park, and the next day we visited Lehman Caves in Great Basin National Park and did the 30-minute Gothic Palace tour, where we got to see various cave formations as shown here. Outside of the cave, they had a demonstration of how small the original openings were that the people who discovered the caves had to crawl through. Matt barely fit. Then we drove up to Wheeler Peak Campground to hike up to the ancient bristlecone pines.
600 feet.
Yeah, Wheeler Peak Summit, that would also go really high up. Look at the elevation gain on it. 3,100. I completely misjudged the length of this hike and the elevation, but the boys were awesome and had no issues. I, on the other hand, had to stop a lot. I forgot to factor in that this hike happens at an elevation near 10,000 feet and even had snow in July. In fact, my Fitbit told me after the hike that we climbed the equivalent of 125 floors. The bristlecone pine trees are some of the oldest trees around, somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 years old, and they only grow in high elevations in harsh conditions. They have leaves that look like bottle brushes and gnarled trunks. We stayed near Great Basin National Park for 2 nights and drove 358 miles from Arches National Park for a total of 1,924 miles. After Great Basin, we drove back home through Las Vegas, doing a stop for lunch at Pioche, Nevada, which was a silver, gold, zinc, and lead mining town in the 1800s, and now a historic ghost town. There was a fun playground for the boys by a neat train engine that was part of the town's history. We stayed a night in Las Vegas and visited my sister, my mom, and my brother-in-law, and her dogs. The next day, we drove back home to Los Angeles, totaling 2,491 miles for the entire trip, which took 18 days, the longest trip we'd ever taken. Thanks for watching our trip, and I hope this gets you thinking about doing a Southwest trip of your own.